Hello YouTube, we're going to be doing something a little bit different today for fun here. So, we're going to be ranking most of the Resident Evil games that at least the ones that I'm familiar with, which will mostly be the mainline Resident Evil games and some extra side ones that I've happened to play, based on how likely I would survive if I was in this situation. So, we're going to be going under a couple of assumptions here. Firstly, the assumption that I'll be in the position of the main character of the game, which I will stipulate in instances with multiple characters as we come across them. And aside from that, there will be 5 sort of rules I'll be following when ranking this. 1, I will assume I have all the gear going into it they do. So if they have gear or weapons, as well as special powers, I will also have those. So like if a character was a psychic, for example, I would have their psychic abilities if they were the main character, that type of thing. That said, that does not include things like military training, so I will assume I'll have basic firearm competency because I do in real life. But otherwise, I will only be taking their gear and abilities into account, not things like their training, their backstory, etc. 2, I will have no outsider knowledge of the characters, puzzles, events of the game, ways the enemies function, weaknesses, all that good stuff. Other than if I could figure it out logically in-game, then I will assume that, I do so. But, for example, some of the bosses might have a weak point, and for many of them, it's extremely obvious, like it's their giant, glowing eyeball or something. But if their weak point is like a specific thing like fire or cold, I logically probably wouldn't figure that out right away. So I'm not going to say that I would just know immediately to use that type of weapon against them. 3, in games where enemies drop items or supplies on death, I will assume they will also do the same for me. And on the flip side then, in games like the older ones with the tank controls, where enemies don't usually drop supplies on their defeat, I will assume the same there as well. It's just a way to make it consistent with how the games that have enemies drop supplies tend to have more enemies, so if I also didn't have them drop supplies, then all of them would be impossible. 4, I'm going to assume that healing items will work on me the same way, as in, if I get stabbed but don't die, some herbs or a first aid spray will fix me up, because that's how they function in the games too, to the point where you can even get, shot with a gun, and then just eat a herb and be fine. I don't know what they've been doing, but they need to stop focusing on the T-virus research and focus on those herbs, man, because those herbs are crazy. And 5, I will assume that I will be immune to the virus, or at the bare minimum, immune to contamination due to attacks from enemies, because it's very clear that all the characters that you play as are, at the very least, immune to the contamination from bites and stuff like that. We even see in some of the game's cutscenes that, the protagonists even get attacked by enemies that can spread it. Rebecca gets hit by leeches in one of the cutscenes, and she's fine. So I'm just going to be going under those assumptions. And other than that, let's get right into the video. So, we got our categories here with sort of most likely to survive with Call Me John residents to We're Cooked. I think these are all pretty self-explanatory for the most part. So, let's get started. So first up, we've got Resident Evil. And we're going to be specifically doing the Resident Evil remake because, for the most part, it just kind of is a better version of the game. That's not to take away from the original. It was extremely innovative for its time. But they added a lot of cool things to this game and just did some nice overhauls and new enemy variety and stuff like that. So we're going to just be using this because I think it's sort of the definitive version of the Resident Evil game. And from what I've been able to read online, most people that I've read on forum posts and YouTube videos tend to agree with that sentiment. So if you don't, feel free to disagree, but that's what we're going with. So, Resident Evil. We're going to be putting this in... It's either leaning towards die or high chance of death. We're going to start with high chance of death, and we'll sort it out later a bit more. But, and I'm going to also be attempting to sort them left to right, left being most, likely to agree with this category. So, if it's at the bottom, then that means I'm most likely to die in it. If it's at the top, that means I'm most likely to survive, that type of thing. So, it's pretty dangerous, especially the remake, adding things like Crimson Heads, which, again, with me not having the knowledge of how they work or that they'll even be there in the first place, I would not ever burn the corpses of the enemies, because in a wood floor manor with wooden walls and doors and stuff, like, I just would never think to burn zombie corpses. So by the time those things come around, I'm gonna get swarmed by those zombies. The only saving grace I have is that none of the enemies in that game will move from room to room, so if I'm quick enough to go into some of the nearby rooms, I can sort of de-aggro them, and that's a trend I would probably be able to pick on pretty quickly, and that after my first encounter with a group of zombies, after I retreat into a nearby room and they don't follow me, I'd be like, okay, so they seem to be pretty reliant on their senses. So that's a factor that, like, pushes it out of the we're cooked, and that enemies don't do that. Another factor that pushes it away from the most dangerous categories is the fact that for this, I will be assuming the role of Jill, so going through the things she goes through, and she has a guardian angel in Barry Burton that's kind of there to take her out of a lot of dangerous situations, or at the very least help her navigate them. Things like pulling her out of the room with the ceiling coming down, helping her with the boss fights against Lisa Trevor. In general, his inclusion makes my odds of survival a lot higher. So I'm actually maybe leaning towards die instead of high chance of death. It's tough to say, though. That game also does have some very dangerous enemies. Hunters and the Crimson Heads are some of the most dangerous normal enemies out of the entire franchise, in my opinion. And as far as bosses go, though, the only boss that I would be super concerned about, I think, is the giant snake. I don't remember the name. It's been too long. But I think the giant snake would be the most dangerous. I think Jan is his name, maybe? Yeah, out of the bosses, I think he would be the most deadly. So for now, you know what? Let's give myself a little bit of credit. We'll sort this out later as things come by. We're gonna go off on a high note. We're gonna put it in leaning towards die, but at the top of that category. At least, obviously, right now, because it's the only one there. But, you know, once we add more things to it, it'll probably stay at the top of leaning towards die for now. So, next up, Resident Evil 2. And for this one, I'll be assuming the role of Leon, not Claire. And the reason I'm doing that is, same with Jill. In my experience with people I've talked about that have played the game, they played as Jill their first time and Leon their first time. So it's sort of a lot of people's first iteration of... or it's kind of like people's main, like, version of the story. And not everybody plays all the routes, myself included. I actually have never played the Chris route in original Resident Evil. So, based on that logic, I'm going to be saying I have Leon's route as my route. So Mr. X, in theory, is a big issue, but he's really slow, is the thing. And he isn't the most dangerous outside of the end of the game, in my opinion. He just shambles around and follows you around. And yeah, honestly, until he starts mutating, he's not all that big of a threat. Like, I played through that game on the remake on the highest difficulty I could to start with, and beat it my first time on the highest difficulty. I think it was the hardest difficulty too, because I don't think you had to unlock the hardest difficulty with limited saves. And he was never really a factor in me dying in that game. Like, hallway encounters, I could just run around and avoid him. The bigger threat in that game, in my opinion, was the Lickers. The Lickers were incredibly dangerous. Luckily, I'm actually kind of quiet in real life. I know it might not seem like it because I have a loud voice, but when I'm... even when I was on crutches for like a year, I was able to consistently just sneak up on people on crutches somehow, like to the point where a lot of people called me a crutch ninja. So, a little bit of backstory for you guys, I guess. So, overall, I would say I'm pretty quiet, and that being their main source of hunting would be a nice factor, and they'd be less likely to discover me than they do Leon in that game. A factor I forgot to mention in the original Resident Evil that's also a major factor in this one is the puzzles. A lot of the Resident Evil 1 difficulty for me would actually come from solving the puzzles too, because you have a limited inventory space. You got to do a lot of backtracking and finding items, and it's not always going to be immediately obvious that a random ass item on the ground I should pick up, like a badge or something I might not think is important, only to later find out that I need 3 of them for like a, you know, door puzzle or something, and have to like rack my mind for where I could have left those. So overall though, with Resident Evil 2, I'm gonna put this one and the remake in the high chance of death here. I don't think it's guaranteed. Birkin is also a major consideration. Even his first encounter is pretty dangerous because he's just really quick and really strong. Overall, I just think it's very likely I'd die, but it's not like guaranteed, right? A lot of the enemies are kind of slow, and some of the faster enemies have weaknesses that I could maybe take advantage of. So overall, I would say it's a high chance of death, but there are scenarios like that I could come out on top. So that's what we're gonna go with. So Resident Evil 3, we're cooked. All right, Resident Evil Code Veronica. So, what, you actually want me to discuss Resident Evil 3? So, want to talk about how screwed I am? Sure, why not? Let's see. To start with, we have the world's horniest astronomer chasing my booty across the map so he can tell me all about his favorite celestial body whilst he just bends me over to whatever furniture happens to be in the room with me at the time. We've got some of the most dangerous enemies from the other games, like hunters showing up again. There's also those weird bug enemies that show up and literally mindfuck you. On top of that, Carlos is pretty into Jill, and I don't think he would be as into me, so I don't think he would be as willing to go above and beyond for the Call of Duty like he does for Jill in that game. That's not to say that he's not a good enough guy to try to save my life, but I don't think he's gonna put as much work in. He's not gonna have that dog in him like he does when trying to save Jill. Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of it just boils down to Nemesis being kind of impossible for me to survive, like more so than any of the other like tyrant type enemies in any of the other games. Nemesis is just gonna have my number. He'll bust through walls and doors, and he's just gonna kill me really easily. So we're cooked. All right, Resident Evil Code Veronica. So this is a game that I haven't played in a long ass time, like maybe at this point like 18 years or something. I played it not immediately when it came out. I think I played it like a year or two after it came out. When was that? Actually, let's just look it up quick. Yeah, it came out in 2000. That is insane to me. Yeah, so I probably played it like 2002. So yeah, it's been a long ass time since I played that game. I remember that game being hard as hell, though. Yeah, honestly, I'd say we're cooked in that one, too. The bosses in that one I remember being pretty tough. Alexa is pretty crazy. The Bandersnatches are really dangerous. I'm having a hard time remembering even some of the enemies for that game. Like, I just remember that game being really hard, and I think my brain just sort of blocked the memory of it. I would also, again, be assuming I'm playing as Claire in that. I unfortunately don't have as much to say about Code Veronica because, again, I just haven't played it in so long. But I distinctly remember it being brutal enough that I'm just going to put it in the weird cooked. I don't think it was as dangerous as Resident Evil 3, though, so I'm going to put it behind Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 0. So, I have never actually played Resident Evil 0, but I did watch a synopsis on the story a bit, and as well as videos talking about, like, the enemies, so I have a good idea of what we're dealing with. Now, if the monkeys in that game were not emaciated and starving, and they were, like, full strength, this would go in, like, high chance of death, probably. Because I think those are probably the most dangerous enemy in the whole game. Other than maybe like the giant scorpion in the train, like the one train car, because monkeys in real life are terrifyingly strong. Like Even just like this, like a small chimpanzee can rip someone's arms off straight out of their socket if they really wanted to. Like, they are freakishly strong. But the ones in the game never really exhibit that level of strength. And while they're fast and annoying, I don't think they would be as dangerous. I do think that, like I said, the Scorpion would be pretty tough. But aside from that, I don't think most of the enemies in that game would be too bad. I'm going to say this is survivor-sided. So there's a few reasons for that. One, like I said, aside, like, the monkeys being what I would consider the most dangerous enemy, also being nerfed, and unironically, I think they would be more dangerous if they were actual regular monkeys trying to kill me, is a pretty big factor there. As well as just the fact that, yeah, aside from the Scorpion, there's not really that any of the bosses that I found stood out as particularly dangerous looking. There are the frogs, too, which, to be fair, the frogs would be pretty dangerous. But also, I wouldn't be as helpless against them, I feel like, as you are in the game because of the game mechanics. Because the way they work in the game is, if they grab you with their tongue, they just slowly reel you in, and if the other person doesn't save you, you're dead. But, like, if I'm in that situation, I'm not going to just sit there and do nothing. I'm just going to grab my pistol and shoot its tongue, probably, or shoot it in the face, you know. Like, I don't think they're going to be as lethal, in all practicality. I don't think they're a particularly dangerous enemy to consider. And on that note as well, Billy's there. And unlike with Carlos, Billy seems to be pretty just, like, both Carlos and Billy have pretty strong morals, but Billy didn't really show any signs of being interested in Rebecca in that sort of romantic way, you know? He was just being a good dude and also a survivalist. He was just like, all right, we gotta work together if we want to survive because there's a lot of crazy shit on this train right now. Let's kill it. Let's trying to kill us and whatnot. So I don't think he would be any less effective as Carlos might be with, you know, me being a dude, you know? So I think that Billy, and Billy is a fucking, he comes in clutch. Like, he's very useful. I mean, there's that whole centipede boss fight where I would basically get grabbed, but Billy's just badass enough to just kill the centipede without any assistance from me and just save me. So, honestly, I think Resident Evil 0 would be survivor-sided. You know, I'm actually going to make maybe a controversial one for now. I'm going to put it in probably survive for the time being. Just because having Billy with me a lot of the time, who has extensive military training, is really going to make it a much better time for me to survive, I think, overall. And some of the leech enemies are a little bit dangerous, but, like, none of them were too bad. And again, a lot of the danger for, like, the leeches for a normal person would be that they could infect you. But given the stipulations I had before that I would be immune to the infection from enemies, then a lot of the leech danger kind of goes away. The final boss also isn't super dangerous, all things considered. So we're going to put it in probably survive for now. Resident Evil Outbreak I played. I did not play the second one, though, so I preemptively moved it out of the way. So Resident Evil Outbreak I played, and we're going to put this one in probably survive as well. Logic being, so there's 5 stages, and honestly, I think the second stage is probably going to be the toughest, just because it's like that like sewer system with like a complex. I haven't played it in a while, so I'm not remembering the precise layout, but I do remember that you know, the first one is like in the city, which is honestly not that bad because you've got like a lot of other people that are sort of aggroing the other enemies. And the other factor, in my opinion, that makes it pretty likely I would survive Outbreak is that aside from like one character, they're all just kind of regular ass people in the game. You got like a firefighter, you got a school, like a high school girl that her only ability she has is a backpack. You've got a retired what was that guy? There's like the guy that reminds me of I keep wanting to call him Coach because of Left 4 Dead, but he was very similar to him in like physique and his like power. Which granted he's very strong, but like if I remember right, he has like a limp or something. Like he's not super fast, like lore wise. Like none of the characters in that, aside from like the cop, have much like going for them as far as capabilities go. And you also have like 3 other survivors at minimum, I believe, in each of the stages that are also attracting the attention of the finite like number of enemies that are in the game. So I think the second stage would be the most dangerous because I don't remember the specifics of it, though I'll try to put clips of the monster. But there is like a boss enemy at the end of that stage that would be pretty tough to take care of. But otherwise, I don't think any of the other areas would be that bad. Maybe the burning house would be tough, but honestly, that game wasn't too difficult as far as like the hazards go. The difficulty was more so just like the game mechanics itself, and that you're on like a limited time because you get infected over time, which is worth noting in this one. The characters were not immune to infection. They had an infection gauge that filled up over time, so that would be a factor. But none of the enemies in that game are really all that fast or super dangerous, aside from the aforementioned boss enemy in 2. So I think Outbreak would be a probably survive moment, honestly. I'm actually gonna... Yeah, just due to the nature of the boss and the monkeys of Resident Evil 0, I'm gonna actually put Outbreak above 0 in survivability. And again, also Rebecca does have trainings, whereas none of these people really have training and they survive. So I'm gonna go like that for the time being. Resident Evil 4. All right, so factors going for us. We have Ada backing us up, and I'm gonna lump these together because they're pretty equivalent in lethality as far as I'm concerned as well. In fact, I don't think any of the remakes were substantially more dangerous. Actually, that's not entirely true. RE4 remake is a lot more fast-paced, so... Yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna go like that and that for the time being. I think the remake is actually a step more lethal than the OG, just because the original game had certain mechanics in play that make the game easier for Leon to deal with, because the control scheme isn't as, like, you can't move while you're aiming. So to accommodate for that, enemies will sprint to get close to you, and then once they get within a certain, like, radius of you, they slow down and start shambling towards you. That is not the case in the Resident Evil 4 remake. There aren't really very many anti-swarm like features in the game. The enemies just kind of like run at you. Now, you can parry enemy attacks in that game, but the thing is, I don't think I'm gonna be able to parry a lot of the enemy attacks. Like if one of those Bella sisters runs at me with a chainsaw, I don't think I'm gonna be able to parry it with my knife, you know. I might be able to, like, you know, parry a punch, like a slow wind-up punch like you can do in that game and cut an arm off, or, like, parry, like a slow swing with a sickle at me, but, like, it's not going to be as cleanly as Leon does it, where, like, he does a quick parry motion, and then the enemy stumbles away and you can do a follow-up attack. It's going to be, like, I block it and, like, have to, like, push back at it to push the enemy attack away. So, I think, for the most part, the Resident Evil 4 remake is going to be much more dangerous than the original, but they're both pretty deadly. So as far as regular enemies go, Ganados are more dangerous than zombies just across the board, outside of maybe Crimson Heads. The Ganados are just more coordinated, more dangerous. They have weapons, dynamite, traps they set. They're just pretty fucking dangerous. Like, let's be frank. There's also this, like, lots of special infected type of enemies that are quite dangerous. The dogs in this game, I think, are even more dangerous than the dogs in some of the other games, because they also get these special mutations that make them even sturdier, as well as give them, like, a ranged attack for, like, if I happen to, like, blast them away, they can hit me with their tentacles from a distance type of thing. Speaking of tentacles, the special Plagas that will sometimes burst from heads are all highly lethal. You got El Gigante. I don't think I'm gonna feasibly be able to beat him in the remake because of how fast he is in the remake. I could maybe do it in the original because he kind of slowly shambles and then he has long windups for his attacks. But it's a bit iffy. The dog helping would also be a pretty big factor because there's 0 universes where I don't free the dog from that bear trap at the beginning of the game. Chief Mendez is gonna be pretty dang difficult to deal with. Salazar is gonna be pretty damn difficult to deal. Like, honestly, like all the bosses in that game. Del Lago, the giant lake monster. Yeah, you know, as I'm talking more and more about it, both versions, I think, I'm just gonna put in the word cooked. Like, it's a very lethal game. Garradors, those enemies are super deadly. Though again, like I mentioned with the Lickers in RE2, they do rely on sound, and I'm pretty quiet, so I think I could maybe use that to my advantage, and maybe even have them kill some of their compatriots by, like, being quiet whilst they're making noise and getting them to, like, swing wildly at them, that kind of thing. Regenerators, yeah, that, I don't think I even need to explain that one. I could maybe outrun them, which is nice, but there's no chance I kill them. Even if you give me the sniper rifle with the heat-seeking stuff to see their weak spots, I don't think I'm gonna be accurate enough to hit them while they're moving like that, like Leon is. So I just don't see me beating those guys. Sadler's gonna obviously be a problem. Salazar's boss fight's gonna be a problem. His right-hand man, Verdugo, is gonna be a problem. Like, every single enemy in that game is just lethal. Like, even just the first scenario of the game with the you know, trying to hold out until the church bell rings, I think it's not likely I survive. So RE4 is, yeah, going in the rear cooked. I still think it's less lethal for me than Resident Evil 3, just because of the confined space of Resident Evil 3 and the continuous threat of Nemesis giving you no free time, as well as the fact that Leon has the shopkeeper that helps him with supplies, as well as Ada helping him with Krauser, which I also forgot to mention right away, but Krauser would absolutely cook me, like, 0 questions asked. So, anyways, yeah, we're cooked with Resident Evil 4 as well. Resident Evil 5. This might be a little controversial, but I'm gonna... my gut right now is telling me it's either coin toss or survivor-sided. We're gonna put it in coin toss for now, and maybe I'll solidify my opinions as we talk about it a bit more. So, I will assume that I'm in the role of Chris, which means I have Sheva backing me up, and I will take absolutely zero slander in that Sheva is an absolute badass. Like, just because the AI in that game wasn't great, like, the feats Sheva has in that game, she is extremely, extremely competent. Like, she's gonna hard carry my ass through this. The most difficult parts, in my opinion, are gonna be the sections where I'm separated from her, where, like, you know, I have to toss... actually, even then, a lot of the sections where we were separated, it's like, I'm separate, like, I'm tossing her over some sort of gap, or I have to, like, you know, send her somewhere because she's lighter weight than me. And the thing is, though, she'll just, like, immediately, like, regroup with me, and then we'll have a lot of enemies to deal with, but we'll be dealing with them together. So most of the sections we're separated aren't even going to be, like, too bad, because we're not separated for super long. And again, like, she's just really badass. People that don't think so are probably just mad at the AI of the game. Look at her fights, like, with Wesker, like, especially the fight with Wesker on the plane. Like, she comes at him with a knife twice. One of the times she, like, makes him fly up to the ceiling and in order to avoid her attack, and the other time she stabs him in the shoulder and he starts choking her. And Wesker is freakishly strong, and she manages to reverse the chokehold on her, like, knock him to the ground, and then Chris is able to inject him again. Like, I don't know. I don't really see any case where she's not just, you know, pulling a lot of the work here. Now, some of the main concerns for this. One, I'm not punching a boulder. I'm not moving that boulder. I'm gonna have to find some other way to regroup with her in that scenario, which I don't think would be impossible, because yeah, I'm not going to be pushing that boulder. But yeah, that part's gonna be a bit more tricky because I am not made of steroids like Chris is. And on that topic too, Wesker is obviously going to be extremely dangerous. And I honestly can't tell if it's going to be more or less dangerous for me, because on the one hand...
Chris.
Wesker really hates Chris, but at the same time, I think because of that hatred, he kind of toys with him a bit more. I don't think he would toy with me as much, so he's going to be a lot more dangerous to deal with. There's a decent chance he might just try to bum rush me, but at the same time, he's also really cocky and full of himself, which, to be fair, he kind of has the right to be with how powerful he is, but I could see, especially with me being, like, somebody with no military training, or any notable, you know, feats like that he might just take it easier and like not think his plans are in danger at all. And I might be able to like surprise him with some ingenuity type of thing. So that would be one of the more dangerous things. I think the spider boss fight would be one of the more dangerous things. And then once again, Gatling gun enemies are going to be pretty dangerous. But and like the Maginis, I think that's what they're called, right? Maginis. The enemies in RE5 too, and generally, like the normal enemies, are more dangerous than the Ganados in Resident Evil 4. But again, that's sort of balanced out by the fact that I have a partner that's super badass. So I think that more than outweighs the extra lethality. Aside from the enemies with the guns, I think that normal enemies aren't going to be too big of a issue to deal with. Aside from that, the only other enemy that I would say would be a major concern would probably be this iteration of the Lickers, because they don't seem reliant on sound as much as they are in like Resident Evil 2. Like they can pretty consistently move towards you and jump on you. And there's that section where there's the long hallway with the enemies that are slowly crawling towards you while you're waiting for the elevator. It could be pretty dangerous with the Lickers. But yeah, I think coin toss is kind of right. There's some pretty lethal enemies, no doubt, but having Sheva is just such a massive asset, on top of the fact that the enemies do consistently drop supplies, so I'm just going to be constantly getting more ammo to work with. Yeah, I think if it wasn't for the fact that Wesker probably would be, actually, now that I think about it, much more gung-ho to just deal with me, I would maybe put this up to Survivor-sided, but because I'm not Chris, I think he's not gonna toy with me as much. So we're gonna leave that in the coin toss one. So that's the first 50-50. Revelations. So this is the era of the games where they really started to give you a lot of help, which I think is gonna make a lot of these later games much more likely for me to survive. So Revelations, you have, I don't remember his name, but you have that larger dude with you. So I'll be assuming I'm taking on the role of Jill in this. So the enemies in this one are fairly fast, but they also stagger really easily, and they stagger for a really long time. When you shoot the enemies and stun them, they'll stay still long enough for you to do like you can charge your melee strike against them, was one of the unique things added in this game. I probably wouldn't do that to them realistically, but just the fact that they stagger as long as they do would give me plenty of time to like reposition and just finish them off with guns or get to a safer spot type of thing. So as far as enemies in that game go, normal enemies are, I would say, less dangerous than the Ganados, but more dangerous than the zombies. As far as the bosses go, the only boss that I think would be a really high lethality boss would be the final boss with the teleporting nemesis that has like the illusions. I could see that one being very lethal. But having the backup, there aren't really any puzzles I have to worry about, so my tiny brain isn't going to be punished in this one. I'm going to be putting this one in Survivor-sided, I think. There's just not really any enemies that are really standing out to me as being like super bad. Other than the final boss, and I could see maybe some of the underwater sections being pretty tough, because I'm not like the fastest of swimmers, and maybe the dude with the buzzsaw for a hand, I think they could be pretty dangerous, just because of how they're fairly quick. They have a obviously insta-kill attack with their buzzsaw, and they're also pretty tanky. But again, you can stun them for like a long time, and so where Jill would, kick them after she stuns them, I would just take out my shotgun and just start pumping rounds into them. So I don't think it's quite in the probably survive. Like, it's not in like the 80 to 90% like I have for this. But I would say that like, there's a solid 70% chance I survive, probably. Somewhere around there. Again, a lot of that being the fact that I don't think any of the enemies are particularly deadly compared to some of the other entries. And I also have a partner with me that's pretty badass the whole time. So, Resident Evil 6. So, I wish, you know what, let me do something quick. Okay, for fun, we're also going to rank them by their campaigns as well. But let's just get this out of the way. Oh, actually, no, are we cooked, or is it high chance of death? I think, on average, it's probably a high chance of death, but some of the campaigns are going to be in the we're cooked category. let's go left to right here. Leon's campaign, I think we are cooked. Reason being that there's just consistently extremely dangerous enemies in that one. Not to mention the final boss being like a fucking 30 phases that are all, you know, really lethal and deadly. There's the whole shark encounter. I don't think I survive. All in all, I think Leon's is going to be pretty tough to survive. We do have Helena, which is a pretty massive asset because she's pretty competent. But I don't think she's quite as badass as Sheva. I don't think it's even remotely close, but she's still like about, you know, competent enough to help me get through some of the scenarios. But I don't think she's good enough to get me out of the weird cook category. I think if it was Sheva, we maybe go to high chance of death, but yeah, I mean, this is just a very deadly camp like setting. Not to mention that like weird gas enemy with like all the growths on him. Like, yeah, no, Leon's is pretty dangerous. In the same vein, we're definitely cooked in Chris's campaign, I think. Piers is, I would say, from you know, probably more badass than Helena, just from like the showings we have of him, especially at the end when he gets his mutation, you know. But overall, I think the enemies that Chris deals with is the most are the most dangerous of the normal enemies. Whereas Leon is dealing with a lot of normal zombies. They're aggressive and fast normal zombies, but they're still normal zombies. Chris is dealing with like the enemies that are using weapons a lot more and stuff like that. One thing I kind of noticed too with Resident Evil 6 is that the 3 campaigns sort of had like different focuses. So Leon's campaign was more focused on the survival horror like aspects of it. It was a more spooky and just, you know, like horror themed campaign. Chris's was almost entirely action based. Like pretty much every set piece was like high octane action. And Jake's campaign is kind of in the middle, where it has a lot of action and but it's also got some of those horror elements with the what's his name, Ustagon, something like that. Like, you know, Ustanok, I think, just pursuing you the whole time. So, but anyways, back to what I was saying with Chris is, normal enemies are already bad enough, but then you have the, like, invisible snake encounter, and especially their, like, final boss set piece with that massive thing that will just pancake me instantly. Like, I don't think I'm not as fast as Chris and Piers, so I'm not outrunning that as easily, and it's gonna be over for me on that one. Now, maybe this might seem controversial, but given the parameters I have given myself, I'm actually gonna put the Jake campaign in high chance of death rather than we're cooked. Actually, I'm gonna put it in leaning towards die. Here's the thing. Yes, he has Ustanok that's pursuing him constantly, sort of like a mini nemesis. But the thing is, Jake has superpowers, and I would be giving myself, you know, the same abilities he has. So I wouldn't have his mercenary training, but I would have, like, the Wesker, you know, heritage giving me, like, the super enhanced strength, reflexes, speed, all that stuff. I think that just gives me such a natural advantage that it's a lot more likely that I'm going to survive that one, I think. And also, Sherry has regenerative capabilities, so if I'm not able to pull as much weight, she can kind of take some heat and not die as much because she has like a little bit of a healing factor, you know. I'm actually going to put it all the way up to coin toss, I think. Because I think, again, the most dangerous thing about Jake's campaign is Ustanok, that is constantly pursuing you. And don't get me wrong, he's fast and dangerous, but a lot of the times when you fight him, your goal is not to defeat him in an outright fight under normal like circumstances. A lot of times you're either stalling, running away from him, or you have like backup that's helping you out, like when Leon and Helena, I believe, join you for the fight. Aside from that, there aren't really any other enemies that really stand out to me. I could see maybe the facility being a little bit dicey when I don't have any weapons for a bit of it and I have to use my hands. But again, I just think that having access to Jake's abilities would make it much, much easier. Now, don't get me wrong. If I wasn't using those parameters, it would go in the we're cooked category. but just getting those essentially superpowers just immediately skyrockets my survivability, to the point I'm even tempted to move it up to survivor-sided, but I think I'm going to leave it here, just because at the end he does have to fight Ustanok barehanded to, like, finish him off and put him in the lava, which doesn't finish him off, you know, but it's, like, the last time you fight him. And I think that's the only reason I'm leaving it out of survivor-sided, so. Ada's campaign, I'm going to put in high chance of death. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of dangerous stuff going on in it, and I am by myself, which is a big factor, but I will have, she has a bit more gear, I feel like, that's, like, more useful for somebody like me than just, like, you know, a gun, like a pistol and a shotgun. Her, like, crossbow thing is pretty dang useful, and her grappling hook is pretty useful as well. And I don't think her enemies individually are as dangerous just because she's by herself. The most dangerous part would probably be the ship part with, like, the growth that's just chasing me throughout the ship, essentially. And then the fight with What's-His-Toes, the final boss of Leon's campaign. But I don't think hers would be quite as dangerous, personally. The bee or, like, insect enemies would be pretty bad, too. And also the regenerator variants in that game are arguably more dangerous in this game than they are in Resident Evil 4. So, I mean, it's not going to be a cakewalk, but I don't think it's quite as damning as the ones in here. Like, I don't think it quite warrants going this high up. Though we are going to put it, yeah. Yeah, I think it's at the bottom of high chance of death. So I think with all this in consideration, RE6 as a whole averages here, but the campaigns were different enough for me to warrant separating them. And I think Chris's campaign is more lethal for me than Leon's would be. So that's why we have it sort of this way. All right. Revelations 2. This one's a bit interesting because you play as a combatant and a non-combatant, and it's cooperative. Now, what that would normally entail is I would be playing as Claire and Barry. And I think in the case of berries in particular, I would that would have to be the case because I'm not going to be a small child like that. I wouldn't be able to, like, get away with some of the stuff she does because she's a small child. But, like, I could very easily, you know, make a case for being Moira in the first one because you can choose who you play. And I actually played as Moira my first time because I played it with a friend and they played Claire. In fact, I have played as Moira 3 out of the 4 times I've played through Revelations 2. I've only ever played as Claire once. And Claire is a bona fide badass. Having her there would make it pretty likely that I would make it through a lot of the scenarios. Don't get me wrong, it's extremely dangerous, and if my fear spikes too high, then I'm gonna die. But maybe this is gonna sound weird, but I have a pretty high tolerance for fear in general, especially if we're talking about, like, current me with, like, some of the stuff I've been through without going into too many details. I've been in life or death scenario type of thing. I wouldn't be the most accurate with the gun, or as accurate as Claire with a gun, but I could hit just as hard as, if not harder than Moira does with a crowbar. I'm also not going to have the same mental hang-up that she has about not wanting to use a gun, which is going to be, I think, a massive factor. So I think if we were ranking them separately, in fact, let's do that too for this one. All right, there we go. So yeah, if we're going to rank them individually too, like we did with Resident Evil 6. And if we're talking Barry's campaign, that's going in high chance of death because I'm basically solo while also having to protect a little girl. And I mean, she's useful, don't get me wrong, but you're basically solo. The main thing she's useful for, I would say, is the invisible enemies that she can point out to you. Those bugs would otherwise be like auto death type of thing, but she gives me a shot at it. But whereas with Moira's, I'm honestly putting that into survivor-sided. The two main mechanics that I have that really go for you in the Moira and Claire campaign, and again, I played as Moira more than Claire, and I played it as my first time, so I'm going to be putting myself in the perspective of that. Maybe you think that's cheating, but I mean, sue me, I don't know. Please don't. But anyways, that's just my take on that. Is that the main mechanics going for her is that she can stun enemies with her crowbar, and she can stun them with her flashlight. So, like, in other words, the enemies are very susceptible to a flashlight, and that's with the stipulation that she isn't using a gun. I would absolutely use any gun I find across, and I would use a flashlight. So I would pretty easily be able to pick up on the enemies being very averse to flashlights and just blind them with my flashlight and then just, execute them point blank, with a headshot type of thing, which would easily make up for my lack of accuracy, potentially, compared to, other characters in the series. So I'm actually gonna be so bold as to put that in. We're gonna make her campaign our first Call Me John resident. I think in the Moira Claire campaign, I'm gonna absolutely just annihilate it because, again, the enemies have a lot of these very hyper-specific weaknesses to make up for the fact that one of the players can't fight conventionally, and the other factor being that fear was a major component, and I have a pretty good handle on my on fear and my own control in that way. I think that's gonna be an easy campaign. That's gonna be just straight up. I survive it every time. I think just about. Whereas the Barry one is gonna be a high chance of death. So averaging those out, I'm gonna put Revelations 2 in Survivor Sided. Kind of funny actually that both Resident Evil Revelations games go there, but I feel like they're not quite as deadly or high octane as some the more mainline entries. So. Operation Raccoon City, I actually did play. That's why I didn't move this one over here, because all these ones I haven't played. I didn't notice that one when I was sorting this earlier. But Operation Raccoon City, I think I'm going to put in probably Survive. Simply because that game, you have a full squad of people that have pretty high military training. And there aren't really too many encounters in that game that I remember that stick out as holy shit, this is crazy, right? You're basically just playing as a Spec Ops crew that's cleaning up messes in Raccoon City, I believe, during the events of Resident Evil 2, alongside the same stuff, trying to deal with that. And let me pause quickly. Okay, I was a bit wrong. There are Lickers and Hunters. I haven't played this game since it came out, and I beat the crap out of it with my best friend. But, so I haven't played it since then, really, but I just don't remember anything about that game being particularly difficult, even though, some of the enemies, show up, seem, from what I'm looking up, show up a bit. Having just, a squad of people to take care of scenarios, just really sort of makes the amount of weight I need to carry substantially lower. So I'm gonna put that one in probably Survive, honestly. Resident Evil Biohazard. This might be another hot take, but call me John Resident, because I don't think I'm dying in this one either. With the stipulations I have in mind. Now, you could technically make the case that, spoiler alert, I guess, but if you're this far in the video, I don't think you care. Ethan does die and then get revived by the mold. But, so I guess you could technically say we die because he dies at the beginning of the game. But he still lives a normal life afterwards, and in fact, he gets, pseudo superpowers from it, and that he has insane regeneration. You might not be aware of it. It's not an easy-to-see scene, but you can have it happen where, in the early sections of the game, Jack can cut off your leg with, the shovel or whatever weapon he has, and put it on the ground, and you literally reattach it and put some goop on it, and it sticks and works like a normal leg for the rest of the game. He has an insane healing factor and just durability increase from the mold. On top of the fact that you can literally just put your hands up and block things like slashes from the enemies, and they do almost no damage. As well as massive overhand swings from Jack when he's using his weapons. You can just put your hands up. On top of that, going into it, he's just a normal dude. He has, no training shown whatsoever, no firearm training, nothing like that. He's pretty much just, as close to me as you could possibly get. And funnily enough, on top of, with all of his regenerative capabilities, there's even, a chance that I could regrow my missing leg on top of that. So I might even get buffed by going through the Resident Evil 7 game. Now, the biggest threats in that game are going to be, in my opinion, the chainsaw fight with Jack Baker, and then again when we fight Jack Baker when he's in his giant weird form in that shack outside type of thing. I think those are going to be the two biggest hurdles, because the molded honestly aren't all that dangerous, just because of how stupidly durable we are because of the molded giving us those like superpowers, right? There is the acid like spewing ones that could be dangerous as well, but again, like their acid doesn't like instantly kill Ethan, so I think even if I got some on me, I don't think it'll function like normal acid enough to just continue eating away at me until like it eats all the way through my skin. So I don't think they're gonna be too much of an issue. So all in all, I think it's gonna be probably the most survivable out of the games, and the reason I'm putting it above Moira's is just because of the off chance that it might even buff me by going through it, by possibly giving me my leg back, but also just for sure buffing me in the sense that it's gonna make me really fucking like, it's gonna give me the molded superpowers, right? So that being said, we go on to Village now. So maybe this is gonna be a little bit cheating because I am going to be giving my, because in 7 to 8 you play as Ethan both times, and in between 7 and 8 you do get like formal military training, and he gets the military training directly as a in response to him surviving the events of 7 when he gets rescued. So I think because of that, I'm gonna give myself that little bit of military training as well. So that being said, I think high chance of death. We're gonna put it in the most lethal of high chance of death. I don't think we're fully cooked, again, just because we have those like superpowers of sorts with the mold helping us. But there's some pretty, like, the lycanthropes are probably the fastest of like the regular zombies and most aggressive. They're very, very dangerous. So I don't really, like, even just regular encounters with those enemies is gonna be pretty tough. On top of the fact that a lot of the enemies I'm gonna be playing with a severe lack of blood flowing to my brain, because it's gonna be flowing to other parts of the body, we'll just say. Castle Dimitrescu is gonna be pretty difficult. It's gonna be pretty difficult because of that factor. I think the like Beneviento's Manor is gonna be pretty easy, just because you don't need weapons for that. You're just solving some honestly fairly straightforward puzzles, and then running from the weird, freakish baby fetus monster, and then you're just playing a game of hide and seek, and then you're done. Like, I think that'll be fairly easy, and the Moro section will be pretty easy. You just gotta avoid the water. Obviously easier said than done, though his boss fight will be pretty tough, because if I'm not paying attention, I could see in a lot of timelines I just dying to the acid rain he spews, because that's incredibly lethal. Heisenberg also giga lethal. Like, he's gonna be very tough to deal with. Mother Miranda is also extremely dangerous, one of the most dangerous bosses in the series, in my opinion. She's very fast. She's got a lot of special powers. Again, the only reason I'm not putting this in the We're Cooked is because of the mold superpowers I have, and the military training I would be getting. But otherwise, yeah, this one is super, super lethal. There we have it. Here's the final ranking. Let's go back through and sort these about left to right to see, make sure they're all in the right order. Let's do that. That. Yeah, I think this, no, let's go like that. I think, yeah, now we have this fully sorted left to right and in order. So I think this is a pretty decent tier list. So we're gonna die more often than not in most of these, right? But there are some games that honestly aren't too bad, all things considered, that I think we'd have a decent shot at. So let me know what your thoughts are, if you agree, disagree, if you don't understand some of my rulings, think I missed some specific details on some of the games, because I definitely missed some details on some of the games that I just hadn't played in a long time, like Code Veronica and Raccoon City, you know, Revelations. I might have missed some details because I hadn't played that one for a while, stuff like that. So, but yeah, all in all, that's my list. Let me know your thoughts. Maybe if you guys like this, and if this video does well enough, I might make more videos of this style. It's been really fun to just off the wall talk about it. If you couldn't tell, this has not been scripted. It's just been me impromptu giving my thoughts on these different things. But I really like the Resident Evil series, and I've played the shit out of a lot of the series, so I felt much more. I felt pretty confident being able to do this list. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Leave any suggestions or comments or thoughts on the list down below. And until next time, stay healthy.